The 70s and 80s are kind of regarded as the golden age for slasher movies, but I think fans also have a real soft spot for the 90s. Scream famously reinvigorated the whole genre, while other hits like I Know What You Did Last Summer and its sequels are still talked about memorably today. But generally, if we are looking at the genre as a whole, the 90s was kind of a dud decade overall. But that reputation has meant that a bunch of really fun slashers have just gone unwatched. So with that in mind, I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 90s slasher movies you've probably never seen. Number 10, Basket Case 3. Basket Case famously follows a man named Dwayne who carries around in a basket the body of his conjoined twin, and the two plan on murdering the surgeons who separated them at birth. Now, for as bonkers and as weirdly iconic as this original movie definitely is, its sequels are somehow even zanier, and Basket Case 3 especially definitely shouldn't be overlooked. That's because in the series' third outing, Belial manages to impregnate a woman, giving birth to 12 of his children. However, when the progeny are kidnapped by the police, Belial is forced to go on another killing spree to get them back. Now, is Basket Case 3 a great film? No, it's not even a little bit. But is it more original than most slashers? Yes, yes, it absolutely is. This thing is nuts. So, if you've grown tired of how derivative the genre is, this threequel will feel like a welcome change of pace. After all, Basket Case 3 is the only slasher to conclude with a bodiless serial killer hunting his victims in a robotic exoskeleton. Yep, spoilers, but that actually happens. And for those reasons alone, it's definitely worth a watch. Number 9, Body Bags. Body Bags was originally envisioned as a horror anthology TV show, but when Showtime pulled the plug on the project, it was instead reworked into a TV movie. And that's a shame, because Body Bags as a concept and as a pilot had, pardon the pun, bags of potential. I'm so sorry. Not only did John Carpenter, yes that one, write and direct the first two tales, he also plays a creepy mortician and the overseeing narrator. And it's also worth mentioning how the Halloween director is a surprisingly charismatic actor with a comedic timing that is just perfect. He's really, really good in this role. Now, the first story is a conventional slasher, following a serial killer who's stalking a newly hired attendant at the gas station. The second chapter centers around Stacy Keach's character changing physically and mentally after having an experimental hair transplant, because of course, I guess. And in the final story, Mark Hamill's character, yeah, that one, finds himself experiencing murderous urges after he's surgically implanted with the eye of a serial killer. And come on, that makes so much sense. We all know that a serial killer's power and evilness is stored in the eye. Like, if you don't know that, then you need to get some homework done. All in all, it's great stuff. There's some amazing cameos in there, as you can probably guess from the names I've just reeled off, and it's such a shame that we didn't get a full series of this. Number 8, Campfire Tales. As I mentioned in the introduction, Scream was such a huge hit in the 90s that it left every movie releasing in its shadow pretty much in the dust. And that's a pity, because it meant some great releases were forgotten, like the one we're talking about right now, Campfire Tales. And just to be clear, we're talking about the 1997 version of Campfire Tales here, not the 1991 version starring Gunnar Hansen, because that thing was a stinker. The film opens with a bunch of teens crashing their car in the woods, and while waiting to be rescued, they decide, for some reason, to start sharing scary stories. You guessed it, all around a campfire. While sharing these scary stories, though, they are completely unaware that a real-life killer is actually stalking the group and planning on picking them off one by one. Although horror anthologies aren't anything new, I mean, we were just talking about one not 2 minutes ago, it's this framing device that makes this movie really work and really sell attention. Even though the 3 scary stories that are told are creepy in their own right, it's every time you return to the campfire and you notice that one of these people are in danger that the movie really comes to life and becomes something really memorable. So, if you manage to stumble on this gem, definitely give it a watch. By the end of watching Campfire Tales, you'll be asking yourself, why don't more people know about this? Number 7, Popcorn. In Popcorn, college student Maggie and the rest of her classmates decide to attend an all-night horror marathon in an abandoned theatre. And during the all-night horror-thon, Maggie discovers there's actually a killer in the building who she believes to be Lanyard Gates, a deranged filmmaker who murdered his entire family. Now, based on that premise alone, you might be expecting an even cornier version of something like The Phantom of the Opera, but there is more to this movie than just the wacky premise. And that's because popcorn itself never feels like a generic slasher, and really does take its time to immerse you into its characters. Also, it helps that the visuals throughout are just top-notch. Maggie's kaleidoscopic dream sequences are hypnotically trippy, and the practical effects for the killer's look are inventive as well. Generally, it's all just a cut above what you'd expect from a film like this. Without spoiling the killer's identity as well, the actor portraying him is incredible at making him come across as sympathetic, even when he's hamming it up like a pantomime villain. And while he's chewing the scenery in every single scene that he's in, you can't just help feel a little bit sorry for him as a character. Like I said, it's surprisingly strong material here. Number 6, Maniac Cop 2. Maniac Cop follows murdered police officer Matt Cordell as he rises from the grave and goes on a killing spree across New York. And while this first film was fun enough, you could argue that it didn't need a sequel at all. I mean, how much more can you get from this premise? Well, as it turns out, quite a bit. That's because this time around, Cordell teams up with another serial killer, making his rampages even more lethal. Also, Maniac Cop 2 kinda does the whole protege of a serial killer thing better than Halloween Ends, which, make of that what you will. Not only are the kills bigger and bloodier this time around, but the car chases in particular look so dangerous, it's kinda hard to believe that the stunt drivers didn't get killed during filming. Like, I don't want to speak for anyone, but this thing doesn't look safe. But hey, maybe that's just the power of really good filmmaking tricking my brain. Also, it's just really fun and kind of insane to watch Cordell himself start butchering his victims while he's on fire. Like, not metaphorically on fire, not that he's doing really well and is on like a kill streak or anything like that, like in Call of Duty. Like, the guy's literally on fire and he's still going to task on these guys. It's impressive going for a movie killer out, that's all I'm gonna say. Generally, Maniac Cop 2 is just so fun that it makes the first one just seem like a bit of a warm-up. Number 5, The Guard from Underground. Kiyoshi Kurosawa is hugely responsible for popularizing modern Japanese horror. The dude is an absolute veteran of the genre, and although Kurosawa is renowned for horrors like Cure and Pulse, he deserves more recognition for his first slasher, The Guard from Underground, aka the security guard from hell. The story revolves around a security guard called Akiko who suspects her co-worker, a former sumo wrestler called Fujimaru, is actually a killer. Rather than focusing on gore or outright scares, The Guard from Underground is absolutely dripping in tension from start to finish, as you would probably expect if you've seen the other works from this director. And despite almost functioning as a creature feature at times, because the film emphasizes Akiko's personal issues and frustrations with her job, she comes across as a very relatable protagonist. She keeps the movie grounded and the suspense is all the better for it. Put simply, it's a great movie that barely gets any attention and definitely needs to be seen. Number 4, Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight. Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight is the kind of film that you just have to see to believe. I can't believe this thing exists, that a studio backed it and released it in cinemas. That's crazy. A totally unhinged, supernatural 90s slasher, the movie sees a group of people holed up at a rundown motel surrounded by demons. The issue? Well, inside lies Frank, a do-gooder who's stolen an apocalypse-starting item that the hellhounds outside need to complete a ritual. And who's in charge of the demons? Well, it's none other than Billy Zane, who gives an absolutely unhinged performance and a hysterical performance as the leader of the demons, known as the Collector. Like, this guy is just seriously menacing and hilarious every time he's on screen as he tries to pit the survivors against each other and ultimately starts picking them off one by one in classic slasher fashion. So, while this one on the surface might not look like your average slasher, like there's no guy in a mask walking around some woods taking out teenagers or anything like that, it definitely is in spirit. With some truly incredible practical effects, this is the kind of rough and ready horror movie that you definitely just don't see in cinemas anymore. And with that in mind, you can kind of see why it completely bombed. The entire movie is pretty much held together by duct tape, but it is just so charming because of it. I had the pleasure of seeing a 35mm print of this thing earlier on this year after an all-night marathon at a cinema watching it at 5 a.m. And let me tell you, that's exactly how this thing was meant to be seen. Anything else is doing it a disservice, so next time you're up late and you want to watch something, scroll over, get this thing on, and just, like, lose your mind for a little bit. Number 3, funny games. Whoa, 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 hold your horses. I know you've seen Funny Games. It's one of the most infamous horror movies of all time. But have you seen the original? Also probably yes, but let me off with this one because some of you out there might not have. And no shame if you haven't. I mean, the remake is literally shot for shot and from the same director, so as a result, a bunch of people have just seen the American version and not gone back to the original. However, it is absolutely worth your time to go back and see why this was such a thing to begin with. Now, if you are unaware, in the opening scene of Funny Games, George, Annie and their son Georgie are driving to their holiday cabin, and shortly after the family arrive, 2 young men enter the cabin and begin torturing them, escalating the violence to the point where the movie quite literally just goes off the rails. More than just a chilling horror in its own right, Funny Games, even today, still works as an astute bit of social commentary and a meta-commentary on the genre as a whole. However, even though Funny Games is excellent, I imagine there's only a few people out there who actually enjoyed it, because this thing is intentionally miserable, and it will make you miserable while you're watching it, but you know, in the good way, the good kind of miserable, the horror kind of miserable. Number 2, Star Time. Star Time follows the troubled Henry Pinkle, who's obsessed with a TV show called The Robertson Family, and goes off the deep end when that show is cancelled. In fact, he's left so devastated that he has no will to live without the show and contemplates killing himself. Just as he's ready to end his life, though, a mysterious agent appears before Henry, promising to make him the star of his own series, if he kills on the agency's behalf. So, adopting the moniker of the baby mask killer, Henry begins his murder spree, believing it'll pave the road to fame and fortune. Spoilers, but you might be able to see where this one's going. Now, Star Time immediately stands out as it's one of the only real slasher movies where the hero is also the villain, and not in the way where you only realize that at the very end, like at high tension or something. It's right there from the outset. He makes a deal with the devil, essentially, and then becomes the villain, but you're in his head pretty much the entire time. And because you see everything from his warped viewpoint, you're given a real insight into his mindset, even though, of course, you don't condone his actions. You just have a little bit more of an understanding about what's going on with the character. With that in mind, then, it's a unique premise that, with a few modernizations, of course, wouldn't feel too out of place today. Number 1, Mute Witness. Mute Witness follows a makeup artist called Billy, who believes that she's working on a slasher movie. But after getting locked in the studio after hours, she actually sees some of the actors performing a pornographic scene, which was not in the script. And at the end of that scene, the performers actually kill the actress involved, at which point Billy realizes she's not making a fictional slasher movie, she's actually involved in a snuff film. Of course, this sparks her flight or fight response, and Billy realizes that she needs to escape from the studio, find the police, and alert them of the crime that she's just witnessed. There's only one problem though. Billy can't speak, which in this situation is a problem because she's trapped in the studio and can't just phone the authorities. Although Mute Witness might sound like a gimmicky slasher, and in parts it kind of is, it's elevated by the compelling cast, especially this great central performance. Also, Obi-Wan Kenobi himself, Alec Guinness, is part of the cast, so what more motivation do you need to go out and watch this one? So, that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Have you seen these 90s slasher movies, and are there any underseen or maybe even underappreciated ones that I missed off here? I would really like to know, because my watch list isn't long enough already.